cuts through the haze, confronts the darkness in these end times days. A single match struck against the fear, hope ignites, drawing redemption near. Can you feel the tremble in the ground, a buried heartbeat making sound?
We all live in dead America, but the dawn's creeping across the panorama. This dead awaken, change begins from broken places, hope unpins.
Yeah, we all live in dead America. One healing spark starts the fire, burning brighter, taking higher.
Today we're speaking with Garret Biss. He is a retired Marine Corps pilot, and it's going to get interesting. Garret, could you please introduce yourself and let people know all about you, please?
Yeah, certainly. Garret Biss from Eastern North Carolina presently. And as he mentioned, I'm a retired Marine Corps pilot. And for the last 10 years, I can't believe it's almost been 11 years since I retired. I've been focusing on working in the addiction recovery industry as a coach and as a presenter and as an advocate, and specifically looking at the veteran population and some unique challenges that veterans all go through, which unfortunately leads a higher percentage of veterans to mental health and substance-related challenges, and most sadly, I guess, is this very high suicide rate that we're seeing, which unfortunately is not going in the correct direction, despite all of the funding and the awareness and everything that's being done towards it. So that's really where I'm focused, is on trying to identify, like, what are the gaps? Where are our services mismatched to the veterans? What are the things that we can do to better support and serve those veterans who have served our country? So I'm excited to dig into it and see what you'd like to know about it.
Well, first off, Garret, thank you for your service to the country. It's always a pleasure having veterans on, speaking about veteran things, because veterans protect our system and our livelihood. So I am always honored to have veterans on the show, no matter their rank or title. So the thing that really interests me is that leap from 22 a day up to 44 a day, veterans losing their lives, taking their own lives. Could you touch on that and tell us a little more about that, please?
Yeah, certainly. So some of the initial numbers and reporting we're seeing was between 17 to 22 a day. But when they kind of expanded the scope and looked at the needless loss of veterans' lives, and they started to incorporate accidental overdoses, accidents due to high-risk behaviors, or veterans acting out in a way as a coping mechanism or as a cry for help, and acting out in ways or doing certain activities that maybe they weren't trying to take their own life, but they certainly weren't doing much to not take their own life. So we look at people that launch off their motorcycle at 120 miles an hour, or they're getting into chemically induced accidents in their vehicles. Maybe they didn't set out that day to harm themselves, but they kind of lost everything inside that they felt was worth fighting for, the sense of hope that things were going to get better, so they weren't really doing as much. And when we incorporate all these other needless deaths in the veteran community, and then sadly that number does reach higher into the 40s or 44 a day.
That's alarming. And it's kind of sad that we allow our veterans to come home, and during this transition period that you highlight effectively, we allow this disruption in their lives. And I've listened to a few of the podcasts that you've done, and one of the gentlemen brings up the issue about individuals coming home. They have this like great period of reacquaintance with everyone, and then they find this emptiness because they are no longer serving. And that service, it holds the glue of their personality, their identity. And when that's lost, it's pretty disruptive. And talk to us about that disruption.
Yeah, certainly. So there's a major disruption that happens, and I'm really looking at that transition from military service to the last day that somebody takes off their uniform. And as I talk about it in a TEDx talk that I did last year called "The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face," and really we look at some of the fundamental human needs that we have. Veterans are humans also, even though sometimes they might not seem so if you coordinate or communicate with some of them. But the truth is we all have the same fundamental human needs. We have a need for connection. We have a need for a sense of belonging. We have a need to be able to show up in a way that we can be an authentic representation of ourselves. And then what you touched on is we also have this real fundamental need for meaning. So I used to understand or think of meaning as, okay, it's a nice to have. It can provide some context to our life. If we have a sense of meaning, maybe we get a little bit of inspiration from that. But what I've come to really understand and appreciate is that role of meaning in our life is also what provides our capacity to endure suffering. It's having a sense of meaning. It's knowing while you're going through a struggle that allows us to leverage our strengths and really lean into our full capacity to deal with difficult and challenging times that we're going through. This is true of veterans, and really it's true of everybody. If you think back to some major goal that you have or something that you were trying to achieve, if you were just trying to do it for some arbitrary reason or no reason at all, whether it's lose 10 pounds, save $1,000, read a book, if you don't have a certain meaning associated with that, then our capacity to lean into that challenge, to be uncomfortable for a little bit, and to ultimately achieve that goal is greatly diminished. Also, whenever we have to embrace a time of struggle or suffering, our natural capacity as an individual greatly exceeds how we operate on a day-to-day. So if you've ever taken care of a young child, an infant, or a sick elderly loved one, it requires of you doing some certain things, dealing with less sleep, having more things to manage, a lot more concerns and stress on your mind. But because there's such important meaning associated with what you're doing, you have that capacity to do it. If we take away that meaning, then an individual's ability to navigate and to survive and cope with that struggle is also taken away. And I was having a conversation last week, and somebody pointed out this relationship between suffering and struggling. We all go through periods of suffering in our life. There's going to be some hardships that we're going to face. The difference between suffering and struggling, it can be the same challenge, it can be the same friction, but if we're struggling, that means that we have a sense of meaning associated with that suffering. If we take away that sense of meaning, now we're just in that moment and we're suffering and we're feeling pain and discomfort with no real context or reason for that distress. So once we have taken away that sense of meaning, and for veterans, many individuals, they join the military for that profound sense of meaning that they get from serving something that's greater than themselves. And with this very strong and profound sense of meaning, service members have this capacity to go into difficult environments, to do difficult things, to work extremely hard at protecting and serving our country. And when that sense of meaning is taken away or that uniform is taken off, then that capacity to endure that suffering and the normal challenges, the ups and downs of life that we're all going to experience, that capacity to withstand that also goes away. And I think this is a major factor that leads so many veterans to major mental health and substance-related struggles when that uniform comes off, because the same ups and downs that you're going to face, everybody goes through financial challenges, relationship challenges, health challenges, existential challenges. Everybody goes through those normal things. However, when you're wearing that uniform and your life as a whole has this very strong context and this very strong sense of meaning, it's easy to live through and even thrive through some of those challenges. However, when you remove that context, you remove that overall, that umbrella sense of meaning in your life, then the ability to overcome some of those same challenges that you were able to navigate in the past, that can also go away.
Yeah. But, it's very interesting. When you're in the military, it's like a brotherhood, a community. And when you step back into the civilian world, there's a disconnect with the community because it runs different. There's a separation, if you will. And I noticed both in my father and my oldest brother and my cousin also a touch of the alcohol abuse after coming back and that disconnect and trying to regain the trust in the community, I guess, if you will. So I really see there's this need for the community to understand where the veterans are coming from. And we lack education, and it takes people like you, Garret, to come up and say, hey, this is what's happening in this world. Because even when you come out and you're dealing with the VA and, you know, dealing with doctor appointments, all of these, it takes a lot of patience and, you know, stand down and just wait time. And in the world out here, we want it now, now, now. So there is this disconnect between civilians and veterans that are no longer active service, but they served for so many years. How do we get that connection back? Because we've witnessed Vietnam, you know, as a good example. Those soldiers went over to do a job for us, regardless of the politics behind it. And they got trapped in the political nightmares. And I'm seeing things today that I'm not liking, and I'm hoping this isn't going to reoccur. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, a great point. So I think to help bridge that gap between the veterans and the civilian community, it just requires a lot more conversations about this. I mean, anytime we don't understand something, then we can kind of push it off, or just, other people, and think that the problem isn't something that we can do anything about. So that was another reason that I created that short TEDx talk, was not just to help civilians understand what veterans have gone through, which is extremely important, but also to help veterans understand what they're going through. So as they feel that void emerge inside of them, and as they feel this pain or this discomfort, that they have some context for what's going on to them and within them that is creating this lack of connection, or this lack of, sense of positive identity, really is what it comes to. And then for the civilian community to also see and understand what veterans are going through. So one of the beautiful things about our country is there's more than 43,000 nonprofits in our country that are focused on serving veterans in some capacity. There's a vast array of different kinds of programs. But one of the negative consequences of that is that we have 43,000 microphones out there all saying and sharing a message. Understandably, they got to raise money and they got to raise support for their cause, but they're sharing a message that veterans are somehow broken or defective, or they're damaged in some way, therefore they need our support. So I understand that. I run a couple of nonprofits. I understand that, why that message is important, and it's true. And there are some veterans that are broken and damaged and they need some support. But what also happens is every veteran, every of the 17 to 18 million veterans, is constantly hearing this message that, hey, you're somehow broken, you're messed up. So that creates a challenge, and it also creates this brand image in the civilian's mind of what a veteran is, and maybe how you approach or don't approach a veteran, or maybe what they're going through. And then there's another challenge that really that further enforces this is in the veteran community, in the service member community. We can be very adept at downplaying some of the struggles that we're going through, especially while you're wearing the uniform. You never want to be somebody that draws attention or draws resources. So they tell you to suck it up and just keep going on with the mission. And I understand it in that context, why that can be important. But when you develop this trait, or you develop this characteristic, and you carry that through to the civilian world, then you also continue to downplay some of the struggles and some of the suffering that you've been through. You can also see that as a reflection of your own sense of self-worth. If I can't endure this suffering, then what does that say about my value as an individual? So there's this interesting relationship that we have in the military, and this is, society wide, is that we look at one's capacity to endure suffering as it relates to the value of that individual. So an example would be some of the service members that we revere and respect the most are those special operators, whether it's the SEALs or the Rangers or Delta. And one of the things that we know to be true about these individuals is that they go through some very difficult and challenging things. They go for long periods of time with no sleep, with no food. They can operate in the most austere environments. So part of the respect that we have for them is their demonstrated capacity to endure a tremendous amount of suffering and still be effective at what they do. The cost of this is this creates this unfair relationship in our mind, if it's spoken or not spoken, that there is somehow some correlation between one's ability to endure suffering and the value that they have as an individual. So again, if we carry this understanding or this lens beyond the military service, this is another trap or a major barrier that keeps veterans from reaching out for that support or expressing some of the truths about the journey that they're going through, because they might feel that if I admit that I'm suffering and I can't endure this struggle, then what does that say about me? Maybe I am weak. Maybe I am defective. Maybe I'm not deserving of that attention. And then there's also a tremendous amount of comparison that bleeds into this as well. As veterans get out and they struggle and they're like, I don't want to take advantage of resources that are really maybe designed best for somebody else. Like I know friends that lost limbs or lost lives, or they were in gunfights, or they were in experienced IED explosions. Who am I if I didn't experience those things to take advantage of any of these resources? And maybe it's going to jeopardize somebody else's ability to get that help. So we can, as veterans, we can downplay a lot of the struggling that we're going through, which is, again, why it's so important to have conversations like this, because it's important for veterans to be able to hear other veterans talking about the journey and the experiences. What I really, truly understand, and this is how I ended that TEDx talk, was that regardless of what a service member experiences while they're in the military, that transition from military service itself can be and is often traumatic. So regardless of whether you deployed 10 times, deployed one time, or didn't deploy at all, regardless of whether you're in firefights or IED explosions or not, that loss of connection, the loss of sense of belonging, that brotherhood, that sisterhood that you mentioned, the loss of that sense of meaning, the loss of the ability to just show up as you are. I mean, one of the things that's so profound about having this strong tribe or this strong sense of belonging is for all the things that you can communicate without having to say a thing. All the things that somebody else in your tribe knows about you that you don't have to explain or communicate or dig into, because they are from, they've gone through similar experiences. So they just get you. We all want to be in relationships where we feel other people get us. And that's a major challenge for those service members. Once you take off that uniform, trying to assimilate into a community or into an organization where they don't have a similar background, a similar sense of values, beliefs in many ways, that makes it very difficult to reestablish that deep and profound sense of connection.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I remember back when I was a child, early 70s, we used to go to the Veterans of Foreign War, the VFW Hall, and they would have these great, get-togethers, community picnics and everything. And all the families showed up, and it was a wonderful thing, even though there was destructive behaviors going on, the alcohol, the smoking, all of that. Within that system, there was still a sense of community back then. And I really don't see veterans displaying that now. Can you see anything that points to the reason why they don't want to bring their families into an atmosphere like that anymore?
Yeah, so a couple different reasons, and every veteran's journey is going to be a little unique. But some of the things that I experienced, for one, when I retired from the Marine Corps, I had this huge desire to go figure out who I was. Like, I'd spent 17 years knowing who Sergeant Biss was and Captain Biss was, but I didn't know who Garret was, not as an adult. So part of me wanted to really separate from that and go kind of find my way as in the civilian world. It's only been the last couple of years that I've understood that journey was really a necessary path for me to gain some experience and some insight so I could come back and serve the veteran community. But that was a very real kind of driver or motivation for me when I first got out. There's another big challenge. When you get out, you're kind of in this weird in-between zone where you know that you're no longer a service member. You're not still wearing that uniform, but you also don't believe that you're part of this community that you've always seen as, separate from the military community, the veteran community. So I grew up with images of VFWs and MOAs or some other, DAV organizations. And I was like, oh, those are just all the old guys that fought in, operations that I have no idea what it was about. And then maybe they served in a different service than I was. So I never felt like there was much connection there. That was just a belief that I had when I came out. And I understand why a lot of other veterans find that. It's like, oh, my whole tribe now is ripped away from me and I'm separated from it. Yet I don't see myself yet as somebody that belongs to this other tribe. So fortunately, there are some newer organizations that are really standing up for these post 9/11 veterans and some of the younger generations, so that they can create an environment where they feel a little bit more seen and welcomed, and they can interact with a community that's a little bit more like their own. But I think that's part of those drivers, is one, not feeling like you're part of the veteran community yet, even though you are, still feeling like you're part of the tribe that you just left, and therefore not really having that comfort to navigate into this new place. I mean, it's a very uncomfortable time. Anytime somebody goes through something traumatic or very stressful, one of the things that we do as individuals is we kind of get into a survival state. And when you're in a survival state, you're not looking at, a lot of our higher cognitive functioning, a lot of our brain functioning, or a lot of our wisdom. It becomes inaccessible to us, because our body, our mind, all of our senses are primarily focused on just threat avoidance. So detecting things that could be potential threats and trying to avoid it. And also, when you're in that state, you don't want to jeopardize anything. So this ability to take action or try some new things can also be limited or inhibited, because in that fear state or in that survival state, like you don't want to pull out that Jenga piece that's going to make everything come crashing down. So it can make a lot of veterans really stuck. And that's one of the things that motivates some of the work that I do, is I see a lot of veterans that go into traditional mental health or treatment programs, yet they don't seem to be getting the same value or the same outcomes as many of the participants that those programs were designed for. And I think a lot of that is veterans, what they're receiving doesn't feel like it maps to their experience. They're in groups or in rooms or in treatment environments that are really designed for a non-veteran population most of the time. So a lot of the things that are addressed or shared, or the common concerns and challenges, doesn't map or doesn't resonate with the common challenges of the veterans. So that's where the work that I'm doing is I'm trying to find and bridge that gap, to provide some programming, and that's what I'm working on, is providing programming and support services that complement what a veteran might receive in their treatment or in their care or their clinical setting, so that they can be more receptive to all the value and all the services that are out there.
Have you approached the VA and, outlined some of these concerns with the VA?
Yeah, I've reached out to them a little bit, and in doing so, I also had an opportunity to start working with some justice-involved veterans in a small group down in Georgia. So I got an opportunity to meet with and to share some of the programming that I use in a non-veteran environment. One of the other things I do is I run a long-term recovery residence. So it's a sober living environment with care and support and mentorship and peer support services for individuals that are seeking long-term recovery. And some of the things that I shared with them, and some of the many things that I was introduced to that helped me in my journey in recovery, I was able to provide that to the veterans, and it was very affirming of some of the things some of the gaps that I had presumed, and was very well received. So now I'm working on trying to expand that. How do I get this to more justice-involved veterans? And the primary reason to focus on justice-involved veterans is I see them as a higher risk subset of an already high-risk population. The veteran population as a whole, the 17 to 19 million veterans that are out there, and the 250,000 new veterans that take that uniform off every year, as a population, they're at least twice as likely to deal with a mental health challenge or struggle with addiction. And then there's a higher risk subset of that population, individuals that are really having more severe mental health challenges. And sadly and unfortunately, that leads them to over-reliance on certain substances in order to numb or cope with it, or they get wrapped up in some behavioral issues that get them involved in the justice system. So that's the first place I'm focusing, is on where are those highest risk members of the veteran population, and what can we do to alleviate some of their burden to help them better connect with the resources that are available so they can grow beyond this challenge.
Well, really, Garret, it is about resources, and you touched on it a little earlier in the conversation about all of the nonprofits out there. They have to really struggle for funding. They have to fight for the funding. So how do we change the mentality of those that are giving the funds? How can we touch those people with more realism in the need?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that I see, so I run a couple of nonprofits, and I've been involved in the nonprofit world for a number of years. One of the things that helps nonprofits raise money is showing positive outcomes that they're helping create. So one of the unique things about the approach that I'm taking is I want to not compete with other nonprofits. I'm not saying like, hey, I've got a better program, I deserve the funding. What I want to do is help amplify the outcomes that other nonprofits are making. Help the veterans that they're serving experience better outcomes by complementing what they're doing or providing a better repairing the foundation with which they operate. Because I think when we can look at collaboration and when we can look at how do we serve each other to create better outcomes, then this is something that's going to help us get more attention and therefore get more funding and be able to serve more veterans.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. On your TED Talk, you gave 3 solutions: be the connection, express your truth, and seek more joy. These are the things that can help us recognize ourselves and understand our true self. Can you talk to us about those reasonings?
Yeah, certainly. So each of these ties back to one of those core fundamental needs that I talk about in the TEDx talk, that need for connection, that need for authenticity. And really the need for authenticity is what allows us to experience connection. So we're biological creatures. We have a fundamental need for connection in order to regulate, in order to survive. There was a recent study that came out. It was a Surgeon General's report, and they looked at the impact of loneliness and lack of proper social connection. And the results of the study showed that a lack of proper social connection had the same or similar adverse effects on our health as drinking 6 or more alcoholic beverages or smoking 15 cigarettes every day. So it'd be no shock to anybody that kind of behavior repeated every day over time is probably going to have some negative implications on your overall well-being and your longevity. Well, they also, and this is what the outcome of the study was, that those people that don't have proper social connections experience some of those very similar adverse effects to their health. But here's the need for connection. We are biologically wired for connection. Our ability to survive, our most basic fundamental human needs, if you were to look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom is our physiological needs, everything that we need to live another day. It's our needs for food, water, shelter, sense of security. We, as tribal creatures, are designed for and biologically hardwired for connection. So when we look at a lot of the emotions that we deal with, whether it's embarrassment, fear of rejection, or some of the punishments that we might put on somebody. One of the harshest punishments that we can inflict on somebody is isolation. So even those that are in the justice system or those that are incarcerated, if they really have a behavioral issue, then what do? They put them in solitary confinement, because that is such a severe punishment for the way that we feel and the way that our body and our physiology even reacts inside. But with this need for connection, in order to experience the full benefits of it, we need a connection that is predicated on you accepting me for me, not you accepting me for this version of myself that I'm letting you see. Because the big challenge is, if I feel like I need to show up as a version of myself in order for Ed to think that I'm okay and want to experience this connection with me, then that means fundamentally what I'm doing is I'm putting on a mask and I'm just showing up and presenting to you what I think you want to see in order to think that I'm good enough. The challenge is, as you're looking at this mask, you're only connecting with this mask. You're not really connecting with me. And on the inside of that mask, I'm seeing this message repeated over and over that somehow or in some way, I'm not good enough just as I am. So we get the benefits of connection. Maybe we get a little bit of the sense of safety or a little bit of the sense of tribe, but it's always watered down with this fear that this message that we're continuing to share to ourselves that, hey, maybe I'm not good enough as I am. So instead of experiencing the sense of security and safety and the positive physiological benefits of connection, we're feeling and we're more present with this realization or this idea that there's things about me that I must hide. There's parts of my truth that I better not let get out. And if somebody were to see the real me, then maybe I wouldn't be good enough and all this would kind of come crumbling down. So therefore, to establish the positive benefits that we can get from connection, it needs to be done in an authentic way. So I say be the connection, and what I'm encouraging individuals to do here is to be that connection that they want to see with others. If you want to have somebody that's going to be there with you in the hard times and show up with you and help you, fight the fight, whatever you're going through in your life, then first demonstrate that willingness to others. A lot of times it's what we put out that is reciprocated. It's what we put out and what we show to others is what we receive from them. So instead of recoiling and isolating and just waiting for somebody to come establish that bond or invest in that connection or that relationship with you, first and foremost, we need to get out and offer that kind of connection to others so that it can grow. Expressing your truth is exactly what we just talked about. So do it in an authentic way. Yeah, there are going to be some jerks out there. There's going to be some people that reject us. There's going to be some people that don't like it, some things about us. But the more that we can connect with ourselves first, connect with the true values and the worth that we have as an individual, then this can provide us that confidence to go out and be a little bit more authentic in our relationships. As I touched on a moment ago, when we're in that survival state, when we're in that high stress state, and we're prone to looking for things that could be potential threats, many times that field of perception turns inward and focuses on us. So now we become hyper aware of the weaknesses or the perceived defects that we have. We're very cognizant of any mistake or misspeak that we had yesterday, or any failure or any embarrassing memory that we had in our past. That's what's consuming all of our mental bandwidth at that time, because what we understand is if I were to repeat those behaviors, this could jeopardize the connection. This could jeopardize my ability to survive. So in that process, what we become disconnected with is what is also true. I'm not suggesting that there's anybody out there that hasn't made mistakes or blunders or have things to be embarrassed about. But what is also true is that every individual also has a lot of strengths, a lot of worth. No matter how many mistakes you've made in the past, you have a much longer list of wins and successes along the way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So yeah, maybe you did fail that test in the 3rd grade, but guess what? You also learned how to tie your shoes. You learned how to ride a bike. You learned how to walk. You learned all these other things. So before we can go and reestablish connections with others, we need to reestablish a connection with ourselves and see the true worth and the value that we have as an individual. So that's a lot of the early coaching work that I'll do with somebody is let's help expand your lens of focus so that you're not just seeing the things about you that you don't like. You're not just listing your defects or thinking about the mistakes that you made or some of the struggles that you're currently facing. Let's expand that aperture on your camera or on your mental field of perspective to also recognize and give worth to the many great things that there are also true about you. When we can do that, then this helps us kind of settle that nervous system down and reduces that pressure to hide behind a mask. The more that we're connected with the worth and the more that we're in touch with the worth that we have as an individual, then the easier it is for me to express my truth to somebody else that I'm trying to connect with. So being the connection, sharing your truth, and then lastly, seeking more joy. So I understand joy is a very powerful emotion that can be an indicator or a guiding star to where we will find the greatest sense of meaning in our life. We can engage in many different activities and be a part of many different things, but there's some things that we do where it seems to provide a greater sense of joy. So that's a great indicator for us on where do I want to focus a little bit more time and attention so that I can experience a greater sense of joy and therefore a greater sense of meaning in my life.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And that equals boundaries. When you learn to set and adhere to your own boundaries, you experience joy. And it's hard for people to grasp that, but I love my old self. I used to hate it and I used to try to hide it. And now I am so proud that I'm here now instead of where I was with the old person. So I am always looking for more experience. I don't try to run from it anymore. I want to, if I'm uncomfortable with a situation, there's a reason for that. And you need to lean into that to understand a little more about what is your fear or your hesitation there. And that shows you your true self, your strength, your weakness, and your acceptance of all of that. So I really like that a lot.
It's that ability to listen to yourself internally too. And this is another challenge that we have when we're in that survival state or when we're over relying on a substance or behavior to soothe or numb the pain inside. The problem is you can't selectively numb. So you can't selectively numb bad emotions and not also numb all of the good emotions. And the more that you live by packing all the things inside that you can't deal with and then pouring some alcohol on it or doing something else in order to put out the flames, the more disconnected you come from that internal guidance system or that intuition that you're talking about, that ability to sit with and understand and investigate that discomfort that's coming up. So this is a beautiful thing that progresses, that in somebody's recovery journey is gaining a reacquaintance with some of those internal feelings and emotions, and stepping outside of that survival state so that you have a strong enough footing where you can say, okay, I am uncomfortable, but let me stop and reflect on this. Where is this coming from? Is this a reflection of a past traumatic experience that I had, and my central nervous system is kind of queuing up that maybe there's something dangerous here? Is there a fear? Am I picking up on something that's really not that good in a certain opportunity or an individual? And the more that we can connect with that, then the more that we can use that as a guiding system in our life and help us tend back towards greater joy and experiences. And another thing you touched on was the boundaries. And this also, I believe, ties back a lot to that authenticity piece. So one of the challenges that we see when somebody feels like they can't show up authentically, and they're really just kind of, they're constantly showing up as a reflection of what they think those people in front of them need to see, and they're disconnected from their own worth and value, then what we do is we're living our whole sense of self-worth, our self-esteem is predicated on other people's validation of us. So this is a very dangerous and unhealthy situation to be. So imagine somebody who's completely disconnected with all their own self-worth. They're completely disconnected or unaware of the strengths and the wins that they've had in their life. This can put them in a place where their only sense of self-worth is through the validation of others, which is then a self-reinforcing problem of, now I have to show up as this other version, as this person wants to see me. And this can be the thing that completely disrupts our ability to have any kind of boundaries. Because if I'm surviving off of your acceptance of me, then if you ask me to do something, I don't want to do it. Or if you need me to be involved in something and I just don't have the time and energy, I can't say no, because if that jeopardizes the way that you feel about me, then my whole sense of self shatters as a result. So the more that we can first reconnect with ourselves and see and remember the truth and the value and the lovability that we have as an individual, then this allows us to then show up a little bit more authentically and have the courage to have those boundaries when it's necessary and not to overextend ourselves.
Yeah, it brings up my analogy, the muddy shoe life. Life is like you're a muddy shoe and you're walking down this muddy trail. That mud on the trail, it's people, places, and things. And if you've ever hiked in heavy clay mud, you know that it can get clingy and heavy, and it's hard to keep going if you continue to grab this mud. Find the first rock and clean yourself off. If you can find a mud puddle, really clean it. It makes yourself lighter, and you can reach the end of the trail with a lot less stress, headache, hurt. And it's showing your vulnerable side to understand these things, that it's okay if Bobby and Sue is treating me wrong, for me to say, hey, Bobby and Sue, I really do not like the attitude here against me. Did I do something wrong to you? And this equals emotional intelligence, when you can actually not get mad and withdraw, but actually connect. And what that does is it helps the individuals displaying those disagreeable sentiments. You can actually say, hey, I don't agree with that, and that should be okay. If it's not, you need to find new friends, because they don't respect your personal boundaries and they don't respect who you truly are. Like you stated, it's okay to be who you are. And if we don't find the people that accept us for that true, authentic self, we'll always be grasping for something that we don't know what we're really grasping for. And that's identity. It's simple.
And being okay with your own identity, not some projection of your identity in order to get that acceptance. And that's a beautiful thing a lot of individuals see in their recovery journey as they begin to be more confident about who they are and accepting of who they are. And they begin to show up more authentically. The people that should not be in your life, they're going to they're gonna separate and they're gonna go away anyway. There's certain people that are, not demeaning to the individuals, but maybe they're going through something and they need to leech off of the positive energy or the vibe that you've got, and that's what's holding them up. Well, and when we're doing acts of service, that can be one thing to provide that, but we can't live constantly in an environment where people are needing to get something from us in order to survive themselves. We want to be surrounded by other people who are also on a strong enough foundation of their self-worth so that you can have some of those honest conversations and support one another in our own growth.
I'm really just now starting to figure that out through my podcasting journey. There are a lot of true people, but there are a lot of those people just out there to bolster who they are and get what they need instead of helping the whole community grow as a whole. And that's really what we need most right now in our world, is a community that knows their value, their worth. And if somebody is diminishing that worth, that value, find a new friend. It's the only way out.
Right. Yeah, and find other people that have that strong, stable foundation so they can model that for you. Sometimes we learn the best through modeling. But I think as a community at large, the more work that we can do ourselves to reconnect with the worth that we have, then the better that we can show up for other people. Then we don't feel like somebody's lack of acceptance or their judgment of us is a rejection that I've got to now maneuver so I can overcome that rejection. We can just show up authentically and therefore be a little bit more vulnerable, share a little bit more of our truth. And I think this comes back to that primary adjusting of that aperture. Don't just see yourself for the defects and for the mistakes and the obstacles and the challenges and the people that you've let down. Those things are true, but you also have a lot of other truth to your story. So that if we can adjust that aperture, and this is a big challenge, and for anybody that's in the room, this is a big challenge a lot of people have. And going through some normal processes or step programs in the room, is that initially there can be a lot of focus on, okay, let's get real clear about all the things that are messed up and the things that I'd like to change about myself. Very important work to do. But if we do that prematurely, or if we do that before we've had a chance to reconnect with the worth and the value that we have, then that can be an obstacle, or that can be a hill that's too big to climb. So that's why I love working with individuals that seem to stagnate or get stuck in some of their self-worth, because to me it's an indicator, okay, we got to adjust that aperture again. We got to come back out and see yourself as somebody who's worth that extra investment of effort and the strain and the struggle that you're going to go through, because we can all get stuck in this place where if all we see is the bad in us and the bad about us, then feeling like we even deserve to have a better experience is a hard thing to get to. As I mentioned, I run a long-term sober living recovery residence, and that's the common obstacle that everybody faces, is sometimes things start to get better if they don't feel like they're deserving of things getting better yet, because they're so focused on the bad that they see in them or the bad that other people are telling them. Then they'll start to jeopardize, they'll start to self-sabotage, and they'll fall backwards, back to something that they're more familiar with, which is the chaos and the pain of the experience that they're used to.
That's right. It's really easy to say you're going to do it, but when you start doing it, there's always that hesitation, doubt, fear. And that's why, as an individual that lives it, I watch for the people below me so I can reach down and help them up to where I am. And I hope they get above me so they can pull me beyond where I am. And that's how we build a community and we get stronger. Nobody's going to lead the pack all the time. You need somebody to take that lead and let yourself rest. And that way we're well oiled and we can maneuver well.
Certainly. And that back to the hiking analogy that you had. I mean, if we're all in a community together and we're hiking through the woods, there's going to be times you're like, hey, watch out for that rock or watch out for that stick. And there's going to be times where somebody's passing you a hand to help you get your gear up the next little cliff. And then you're going to turn around and help them up. So that's a beautiful thing when we can all be both recipients of and providers of that recovery support along this journey. I think that's how we come together as a community and best serve. And again, that comes back to each individual understanding, regardless of the amount of stuff that they got in their pack and the challenges that they're carrying through that journey, that they also do have a lot of worth and they have a lot of value. For every pain that we've been through, we also picked up a little bit of insight and experience. And And that's something that, when I first got involved in recovery work, a lot of people would ask me like, hey, you're a human potential coach. You do these other things. Like, why would you choose this population of people to work with? And really, there's two reasons for it. One is for every individual that's struggling with a substance or with a mental health challenge, that's not just a struggle that they're facing. It's also a struggle that impacts their entire family, their neighbors, their coworkers, really the community at large. So if I can help that individual get to a better place, then the positive benefit or the gains from that are many times greater. The other thing is, I think that life in many ways in a person's experience is a lot like a pendulum. And the further that it swings in one direction of pain and despair and discomfort and heartache, the greater the potential it has to swing in the other direction of compassion and ambition and drive and really living into somebody's potential. So that's why it's such a beautiful thing when you find somebody in their recovery journey, when they're able to take all of the pain and all of the hurt and now invest that through their wisdom and through their experience and encouragement to help other people along their journey.
Yes, I believe that 100%. So, is there anything else, Garret, that we should be discussing today?
I don't know. What's a question that I haven't thought of or that you haven't thought of yet?
It's all a journey, and that journey should be a journey of discovery. I know a lot of people, they don't like to discover new things. You touched on it, the norm, the comfort, and when we rip that scab off and we hurt a little bit, we can find out there's a lot under the scab that still needs to heal.
Yeah, it's that process and that journey. And that's the thing. I mean, if I could leave everybody with one message, it's regardless of the darkness that you're in or the struggles that you're facing today or maybe the lack of self-worth that you have, know that you are lovable as you are. You are deserving of greater peace, of greater joy, of greater happiness in your life. And you can achieve that and you can experience those things if you're willing to accept some of the discomfort and go through a process of learning and of growth. All the pain that you've been carrying with you, all the things, we have the metaphor of carrying the things in your pack, everything that you've been carrying in your pack from the heartache and the adversity and the hardships and the traumas that you've been through, there's an opportunity to use those things in order to stimulate and foster growth and greater joy and happiness in your life. So know that that's possible. There's people that are around you that have experienced some of that, and they can help lead you on the way, whether it's in a clinical setting or in a community support setting. You're a human and you're going through a human experience. And sometimes we can go through that human experience and we can get too much of that mud stuck on our boots that it really makes us feel stuck and like things might not get better. But the truth is, if you're willing to continue that journey and continue the process, that things can get a lot better. You certainly deserve that. You're worthy of it as an individual, and you're worthy of turning that heartache and the pain that you've been through into something that's beautiful and beneficial for you.
That's right. And remember, the muddy shoe life, we're on mud and we're going to slip, we're going to fall. And it's okay to get a little muddy. It's part of life. So it really makes us who we are, that hardship, that durability that we have come through, and we're still alive. So I guess the big takeaway here is know yourself.
I think so. And learn to love and accept yourself. In as slow or as an uncomfortable process as that is, be willing to do the work to know yourself, understand who you are today and how you're showing up, and understand where that came from. I mean, back at the end of the day, we're all humans going through a human experience, and some of the unfavorable ways that we might be showing up today, really that's just our best ability to deal with the situation that we are not better equipped to deal with. Doesn't mean that we can't learn that in the future and we can't continue to grow. I love your talk about getting that mud off our boots, and I always associate this with like the self-care things that we need to do so that we can clean ourselves up a little bit. Many times I talk about as we go through life, it's like pushing a Swiffer across the floor. We're going to pick up some grime, we're going to pick up some dirt, and the self-care is the processes that we can do to help clean that, get some of the mud off of our boots. So there's something I think I mentioned to you that I wanted to share with all of your listeners. It's called the Warrior Reset. It's really branded for veterans, but the message and the material there is really helpful for anybody, especially anybody that's in a recovery journey or seeking recovery. And what it is, I found the best self-care practices and the best things that somebody can do to really bolster that foundation of self-worth and get some of that mud off of their boots. The 4 best interventions or daily practices that I've found over the last 12 years, I provide them in this Warrior Reset. So anybody that's interested, if you want to check it out, you can simply go to thewarriorreset.com and you can download a free resource there. And what I'll do is I'll walk you through and I'll teach you how to do these different practices every day. You can do them, all 4 of them, in less than 15 minutes a day. So that's the most efficacious and most kind of fast-acting things that you can do, or that I found that an individual can do. So I wanted to share that with any listeners that were interested.
That's wonderful. So can you tell people where to actually find you and get a hold of you and get involved with what you're doing?
Yeah, certainly. So you can go to, I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and just type in my name, Garret Biss, I should be the only one to show up. If not, then maybe there's something fishy going on. Or you can just come to my website, garretbiss.com, and I'll provide those links and you can share them with anybody that's interested.
Watch out for that AI, that's for sure. Garret, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I appreciate that you're out there, you're sharing. The big thing is you're caring about community, other people. And when we look beyond ourselves, that's when we're finding our passion, our purpose, and our tribe.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate this opportunity, and I thank you so much for what you're doing. I know you're trying to bring a lot of difficult but very needed conversations to individuals, and sometimes that's all it takes is hearing somebody else talk about something that feels like what you're going through to encourage somebody to take those steps and get to a better place in their own life. So I really appreciate this platform and the energy and the time that you're investing in making sure that these conversations are had and are heard by those that might need it.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Jet fuel dreams and screaming blue. The day the sky betrayed the truth. Metal screamed and engines died. Left my wings in suicide. Free fall through the shattered light. Guns removed, I chose to fight. Not with bullets, not with rage, but turning over every page. Trembling hands on silent steel. Learning how the broken feel. Ground rushing up so fast. Is this freedom built to last? Darkness becomes a strength. Found myself beneath the steel. Garret showed us how to kneel. Not in weakness but to heal. From the wreckage, from the fall. Learn to stand up tall. Darkness becomes a strength. Found myself beneath the steel. Garret met us in the gray, where the ghosts we carry stay. Said the thunder in the chest is just the soul that won't find rest. Lay the armor on the floor, find the man behind the war. The sky you lost, the ground you crave is buried in the soul you save. Echoes fading in the night, replaced by sparks of inner light. The ground feels solid, strangely real. Learning how the broken heal. Darkness becomes the strength. Found myself beneath the steel. Garret showed us how to kneel. Not in weakness but to heal. From the wreckage, from the fall. Learn to stand up tall. Darkness becomes the strength. Found myself beneath the steel. No more dogfights in the sun. The war I fight is just begun. Against the shadows deep inside, where the wounded pilot hides. The fall wasn't the final flight. It was the dawn, it was the light. here comes the strain. Found myself beneath the steel. Garret showed us how to kneel. Not in weakness, but to heal. From the wreckage, from the fall. Learn to stand up tall. Darkness becomes the strength. Found myself beneath the steel. Chose to fly without the gun. Rising slow into the sun. Beneath the steel, the healing's done. Found the strength